Hello, hello, and
Hello.
welcome to Arrays of Living. Again, my favorite shows where we are in conversation with someone and with a guest. And today we are speaking with Catherine King, who is a diversity and inclusion specialist. So we have Catherine. Catherine, maybe you can say a few words.
Thank you so much, first of all, for having me. The words are a struggle here because my expertise in the diversity, equity, inclusion field, and there are two separate domains that we've always thought of it about. There's the international domain where you're training people and expatriates who are going overseas, and that's principally what I've done. And when I trained back in 2000, I remember that my colleagues of African descent had said, please stay out of the domestic diversity space because you really don't have the experience. And I was like, but I want to. And they're like, but you just don't. And I was like, okay. 20 years later of being in this field, of being dedicated to wanting to create equal workplaces and equality-based communication systems within systems, it took last year, George Floyd and all of the uprisings for even me, who's mindfully in it and thinks that I'm acting in an equal and just way. But meanwhile, I've been, that as soon as I saw white fragility, I was like, that's me. I got that. I really felt like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that there are mothers out there that have to worry that their children walk out the door every single day. That's not okay. And so that's where the nature of my work changed. So I'm really a novice in the field of diversity, equity, inclusion, but where my strength is in systems within organizations and companies, leadership for sure. Seeing the struggles that leaders go through as they have to navigate the system, which is much bigger than themselves
Right.
in every situation. So it's a group dynamic that I focus on, not the individual in that respect. So when I go to seeing, okay, where's the problem? Because wherever the problem is, there's a solution. I think of the system. But when I think about what we can do right now today, I think of the individual, because there are action steps that you and I could, just little teeny tweaks that we can do that will make all the difference once done collectively and becoming part of what I call post 2020 culture.
And
Because
you're absolutely correct. And I'm going to hold that thought and come back as someone, as you can tell, as someone, I am both a mother
yes,
of four, of which one is a son. So yes, of which there's one son and three daughters, and we can speak about that because I definitely have the experience, and I want us to have, this is going to be an amazing discussion. I love how you're so frank in saying I'm a novice and what pulled you to it, and I will tell you the outcomes for myself. Um, because of the George Floyd and the other things, and then we'll go from it. But first, I want the audience to really understand what you bring to the table. And normally, I actually don't bring you into the in with me till I've actually introduced my guest. But today, I thought I don't know why I did it differently, but I did it differently. So let me step back. Change up is good. Change is good. So let me step back and really talk about what you bring to the table and who you are. So Catherine King is founder and CEO of Invisible Culture. She's a leading corporate consultant who combines various behavioral sciences in her practice as an interculturalist. She is a diversity and inclusion specialist with a focus on global workplace dynamics. And as she indicated, she looks at the systems and works from the individual to change those larger systems. Her experiential approach has been integral to the increased competency, development, and success of many complex and sensitive international negotiations. In addition to executive and family expatriation and repatriation programs, her national areas of expertise include the United States, India, Singapore, Japan, China, Australia, and Costa Rica. So we are bringing an international perspective to this discussion. Catherine studied political science at Stony Brook University, received her master's in organizational psychology from Teachers College, Columbia University, and has various certifications in personality profiles, corporate coaching, and cross-cultural dynamics. Once again, Catherine, welcome. I am going to jump right into this discussion from the perspective of where you talk about just feeling like you were on the outside looking in. I can tell you as a person of color, I can't say I was very different. I am aware of racism. I'm very much aware of it. Grew up very heavily in the Black community in terms of the local community play. We are an immigrant family living, right now in Canada. And I have raised a son in the midst. And I can tell you that my experience is there's a very different approach to male children as opposed to female children. The latitude that my female kids were given what my son was given, was a vast reality check for me as a parent. But more so, when I watched George Floyd, which I wish I had not, I'm away from media. I don't actually have cable or anything like that. But what prompted me to go and search out what had upset my mother, I went, she called me very upset, very emotional, and I needed to understand. And she got frustrated because I wasn't aware. And I said, okay, let me go and see what you're talking about so we can discuss it, because I can't really discuss it. And who told me to watch that? And since then, Catherine, I have never realized the color of my skin my grandmother, everybody probably who follows me knows this story. I grew up with a grandmother that was of a very lighter hue, practically white, the hair, the same thing. And she did not like darker skin. And as her granddaughter, a darker skin, she made me very aware of the skin I was in. But I bridged that gap. I worked on that and I moved beyond that. And here I was many, many double-digit years later, suddenly realizing once again the color of my skin. And on the brink of all of that debate came out Black Lives Matter, using again that word Black, again, a word I do not like from a people perspective. You notice I choose to call myself a person of color. I do not like that word. I've heard it used in such destructive ways within my own family, furthermore, outside of the family. And I have never been aware of my Blackness so much as in 2020, 2021. And I have very radical views of diversity, equity, and inclusion from the perspective that it really took birth. I'm not saying it wasn't there before, but it really took life after that situation. And once again, I find that it's just something right now, or a question, let me say I question, if it is distracting us from really looking at the systemic things of racism that is there, which I believe is an individual issue. Meaning, I do not care about color. I didn't raise my children to understand color. They have diverse friendships, diverse cultures within their world. And so they were shocked as well to having to suddenly look at their skin. So I just want your thoughts on some of these. I put a lot of things down. I packaged it, but I'm going to give you a chance to jump in because it touches so many things. Yes. And I hold it as an individual issue, meaning change yourself, change your perspective, and you naturally change the decisions that come out and the systems that get formed or are formed by just changing yourself. So that's my perspective. So I'll put that on the table and let you, as my guest, speak.
Yeah, no, thank you. At first, I want to say I'm sorry for the fact that you have to go through your life worrying about your son walking out the door.
It is a worry that never think. When he told me he wasn't going to drive, just to show you the different reaction, I was happy. I
No,
was
yeah,
happy when he
yeah.
told me that, which is a ridiculous response because you have to drive. But I was relieved and I was happy and I did not change his mind. Now he's finding that for the jobs he wants to go, he does need a driver's license. So he has taken steps to do that. And I am trying, you go in your grace and you say, trust the greater power, keep my child safe.
That's not, but that's, so
Right?
that's not, and what I would like to lean into without making myself crazy, because I think after January 6th, I internalized so much of the pain and my fragility that I was thinking, this isn't okay. We can't sleep. I got into that crazy, there's a crazy making to the realization and that goes along with this. So there's a lot to unpack here. The first thing I want to say is that I have a lot of faith in my alma mater, Teachers College, which is just north of 120th Street. There's a joke at the Teachers College that just started coming up in my head, and I just started saying it again after not even thinking about it. The joke is 120th Street is the widest street in Manhattan, because I can't tell where I'm going, in Manhattan, because we're on the north side, and on the south side is the back of the business school.
Okay.
And so even though it's not like physically wide or, theologically, philosophically, access, resources, the direction of the focus of the Teachers College is north towards Harlem and social justice and creating education that's fair and equal. The focus of the business school tended to be towards the south, where Goldman Sachs and the Fortune 10 and 500 companies were, which is that was culture then, and that is still culture now. But the Teachers College has so many amazing researchers. The business school has so many amazing people coming in. We have the resources, and as far as systemic racism is concerned, I would get on the Teachers College mailing list for anyone who's listening, because they're doing the work. Dr. Derek Sue is doing work around microaggressions, and the conversation is going on in different places. And what I think one of the challenges is the system of integration between all of these amazing people who are doing amazing work. So as the famous change management expert John Cotter says, change is not an event, it's a process.
Yes.
Right? So we are peeling back a really big onion, but I prefer to think about it more like we are all in an ocean where we're just realizing what it feels like to jump in and out of the water. Some of us have been in the water, some of us have been out of it. And the ocean metaphor really works for me because it's something that we share, it's something we rely upon. But really the task at hand is figuring out how to ride the waves together as a community, in companies, and as mothers and fathers. So the paradigms that I'm usually thinking in tend to be the leader of the family and the leader of the company, right? Or the institution, whether it be, the Teachers College or a public organization or an NGO, whatever that is. So any organization, but the leadership that's required at this point, really what's happened is we've lost the channels of communication as a result of the stress. And even I lose it. So it's very human and natural for us to go into either attack mode or absorb the attack mode. There are actually 6 ways people express stress, but 2 of those ways, I'm going to simplify, oversimplify, but for the purposes of this, only oversimplify, and not to be used in an unhealthy way out there as an overgeneralization, but there's a version of a person that attacks, and there's a version of a person that absorbs the attack. So what individuals can do right now, this moment in time, if somebody is born or their nature, not even their nurture, but their nature, even their nurture, is born to be someone who absorbs the attack, then the person who's born to attack or fight on behalf of something, there's a miscommunication immediately in stress. So that's one of the things that we can do next, but I can go down different rabbit holes. So please give me prompts on the very beautiful introduction that you gave, where you'd like me to jump next.
So how do you see diversity, equity, and inclusion fitting in to this whole aspect of the system that we're
Okay.
trying to change, because I see the system as one massive oiler tank.
Yes.
And how do
that's
you
right.
divert, like how do you move that tank, which is not an easy, if you ever seen an
Yes.
oil tank trying to move in waters or change direction, it is not an easy thing. So where does diversity, equity, and inclusion fit within that whole attempt to move that oil tank in a direction that results in fairness and openness and acceptance of not just Black race, but all races, and
Right.
understand we're all of the same cloth?
Yep. I appreciate you highlighting the need for the Black Lives Matter movement and the All Lives Matter movement. I work in bridging between different groups that are divided, so I've got no home. Because, and you acknowledging that is part of what individuals can do if they feel compelled to create that integration. As far as the system is concerned, I think first I need to say that words are ill-suited for the conversation we're about to have.
Okay.
Yeah, they just
I love
are.
that.
And it deserves a pause. They're really, really ill-suited. So I will try to weave together from a cultural anthropological perspective, as well as my experience inside of companies and from an organizational perspective, my perspective in this moment in time, which is changing rapidly as we speak. Right. And this notion of being on a wave or being in a tanker that could be riding seas that are, one day you think, oh, I'm a sailor because the seas are calm. But, you know, maybe a 25-year-old hasn't had to ride rough seas yet. And or maybe a married couple hasn't had rough seas. And when they do, all of a sudden they're like, ooh, who are you?
Right.
And scientists, social scientists call them stress masks. So if we can think of the stress mask in terms of that's not the person, it's the person in the system. That's the person under stress. So that's not the evil Black man that has been depicted in movies and in films and in 20th century culture, pre-2020 culture. We now have brilliant filmmakers. We now have amazing re-education opportunities through documentaries like 11th and When They See Us and all these different stories that I remember seeing. I remember hearing about the Central Park Five. And when I saw that, shocked me out of my complacency so hard. I get the chills thinking about it. I feel it now. And until we all feel it, then we're in trouble. So that's one thing. But also what I'm finding is that there's a lot of really good content out there in terms of leadership. People who know a lot, they're intelligent, they're strong, they have really strong belief systems that have validity. But with every great leader, the content, probably it's like 80% that's in the realm of truth and 20 that we all have to let go of just because the nature of the interaction. The way we interact influences whether or not the person's good or bad. My perception has as much to, it's very complicated and three-dimensional when you get down to it. Some people call it the soul. Some people call it the spirit. Some people call it neuroconnectivity. Some people call it quantum physics, the way that we're all connected. And so if we can kind of get to a place of where as individuals we could fulfill our highest potential, which I believe has to do not only with developing the mind, not only with dealing and not only with deeping into the heart, but I think the missing link right now, which I'm just learning about a little bit, is the gut. And I just spent 3 weeks cleansing my gut. And when I tell you I don't need medicines, my pain levels have gone from 7 to 2. It's like there are practical things we can all do right now, but that we might not be willing to do because of culture. So one of the things that everyone can do right now that is that I still have to apply myself as I stumble through up these mountains that we all climbing of discovery and curiosity is applying the word healthy before I make a decision, healthy before I judge somebody else. Is this a healthy judgment of that person or is this an unhealthy judgment? Is this a healthy decision I'm making or is this an unhealthy decision? Is this a healthy purchase that I'm making or is it an unhealthy purchase that I'm making? Is this a healthy book to be reading or is it a healthy book to be reading? Is this a healthy thing to be saying to this person in this moment in time? Because the intersection has more to do with the grace and the art that we all have to develop than any content I have in my mind or any belief system that I believe in. Because what we're fighting against in 2020 right now, from my perspective as a person who's trying to do bridge work, is everybody thinks they're right. and the communication is dead. I said it.
But,
It's ethnocentrism from every angle. I'm right, you're wrong. And
but
it's
I
not
don't think
about right. Yeah,
it's not about right or wrong. It isn't about
exactly.
right and wrong.
Exactly.
For me, it's a question of humanity. Everybody, just let people show
Totally.
you who they are. Simple
Yes.
as that. Don't put
Well,
any preconceptions. Yes, you have a gut. Like your gut will kick off if there's something you're sensing, but you're not sure what you're sensing or so. I get that. But it should not be done by preconceived
yes.
stereotypes or
Yeah.
anything. Somebody drives up on my yard and asks for help, I'm going to give them help. If my gut runs off, I might be a little cautious in how close I go to them. Notice I said that, to give them help because something doesn't feel right. But will I still try to help?
Right.
Yes,
No,
because they haven't
I'm
shown me who they are yet, right?
I'm not talking about that gut. I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about the actual physical gut.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
saying that the next step for leadership development,
Mm-hmm.
the next step, and it's radical. It's so radical it'll take a generation or two, is cleaning the gut. What we put in our mouth, what would come out, making sure that the entire digestive system is clean. Because when it's clean, what I've just discovered is that I don't need as much sleep. I'm optimistic. All the things that people are reading books about, trying to figure out how to do. Recovering. I'm celebrating 5 years out of breast cancer, and 5 weeks, 6 weeks out of 6 weeks off of tamoxifen. And so that's why I did this detox for that reason. But I didn't realize I would get this added benefit of all this connectivity. So I actually am starting to develop this idea like, oh, for those who are really at high levels of leadership, for example, someone like you, the original goddess who's got this conversation going, I hear how you're illuminating these stories. It's so important right now, the way that you're illuminating stories, to bring resources to more people like you who can make films, who could do podcasts, who can make music, who can create more. Music is well funded for marginalized voices at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But film still has the gatekeepers.
But what is the practical step then for someone to clean their gut? When somebody is sitting there and going, I don't have a problem, or I want to stay with the kind of thoughts that I have, or
That's
the kind of language that I use. What is the practical step for the everyday person to clean their gut?
It's a great question, and it's twofold. The first one is acceptance. Getting from our ethnic centrism of saying this person needs to be a certain way, and accepting that person is where they are because of their culture, their nature, their nurture, their reward systems in their own communities and families. Everybody's just trying to survive. This beautiful man, one of my original teachers named Andy Reynolds, rest in peace. We lost him this recently, a couple months ago. He's one of the Thank you. He's one of the great interculturalists who taught me. He said, people don't usually walk out of the house in the morning saying, thinking, I want to go piss somebody off today. And so if there's a mismatch of communication, and maybe he didn't use that language, but if there's a mismatch of communication, that's the time to suspend negative judgment or unhealthy judgment, let's say. Mm-hmm. Sometimes negative judgment is justified, but let's take from negative to positive to be healthy to unhealthy. Because if somebody's depressed or if somebody's stuck, and I say you're negative, that's not as fair as saying you're unhealthy. Because if I can identify as unhealthy, then I can have compassion for where you are and the process of change and how long it will take. I had to go through my own acceptance process this year that I can't fix this in one generation by myself on my 50-year-old shoulders. I can leave broad shoulders. And there is something that now I'm not going to rest until I'm ready to go. But that was something that I needed to kind of develop. So a practical step for somebody who wants to physically clean their gut is to learn about the philosophies of eating that are out there and just take the next baby step towards a healthier life. Like just switch for example, I thought honey and maple syrup were so healthy because they were natural. And I learned that stevia is fine and I can be creative. And that's one thing somebody could do, or take a shot of wheatgrass once a day, because wheatgrass on a molecular level matches the red blood cells, because people are eating meat. Oh, I need to get my red blood cells done. But no, they don't. Just a shot of wheatgrass and you can go to work and get your job done. Mm-hmm. So that's like a physical, practical thing in terms of the leadership development that I think that we're going to see in the next few generations. It might be kind of taboo or unacceptable culturally for people right now to give up their meats and give up their foods. But that would be a great metaphor for people who don't want to give up their food to understand how people don't want to give up their culture. We are rewarded for certain things. And the universal truth that my master's professor at Teachers College, Dr. Warner Burke, said was, people do that for which they're rewarded. So if you figure out what they're rewarded for, that's where you can figure out where the motivation is. That's where you can figure out where we can make shifts. I can't remember the wonderful man's name, but he's the CEO of Allianz Insurance. And he said this wonderful thing at the Forum for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion that was out of Detroit in March, where I spoke about the diversity of stress. He said, with the right lever, at the right time, positioned in the right place, we can change and move the world. One person can do anything. So that's where the system, to me, the system piece is very much linked to the individual tweaks and reward systems that we can, and leadership can change now, right now, immediately. So we can't reward status-oriented leadership, which is somebody who's like, hey, look at my fancy car. That cannot be culturally rewarded anymore. We're not scraping up the mountain to try to say, hey, I'm beyond survival anymore.
Well, what about the leadership that is ego-based or failing upwards? And what about that?
That has to be not rewarded by the community, and that's what individuals can do. But there are some individuals that are not equipped physically to step up or to speak out. Just like some people couldn't wear masks or didn't want to take the vaccination, I have to tell you, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, but my first instinct was, that's okay. If you don't want to take the vaccination or wear a mask, we got you covered. I get what you got. I get it. I get you've got a need that's different than my need. And if I can lean into that, I'm starting to shift my perspective from a hate crime to a pain crime. I don't want to call it.
The connection that I'm not seeing, because what you seem to have done is you seem to be extending the typical lens on health to be not just the food you take in, not just the physical thing you do, but also the messaging and the mindset. You have extended that to say that's a health-based type of thing. And if your mindset and your language and what you take in and spit out does not coincide with the community, then you are in an unhealthy state. Is that what I'm understanding correctly?
And you know where I learned that? I just learned that in the last few weeks from this brilliant man, Dr. Andy. I don't even know his last name because I didn't even pay attention, but he has a book that Healthy Feelings, Healthy Heart. Anyway, look it up. He was the one who talked about congruence. He's one of these psychotherapists at the Hippocrates Health Institute. And he and Anthony Chetam, they are the two people who handle that department. Anthony does EMDR for people who've experienced trauma, which again, I wish we could get into more marginalized communities, because if you are wondering if your son's going to come back every day, then there's a level of trauma there that somebody's just gotten accepting to live with.
Absolutely. All of these things we've accepted. And it's just, I'm not saying it's right.
No,
I'm saying that we have absolutely accepted, and that's been the way of life. And we teach our children, we pass it on to the children to say, listen, life isn't fair. Move on. I shrug your shoulders. Move on.
we're definitely in a place in history where we are moving beyond that. We're passing on different messages. We're breaking negative patterns. Technology. We have to say thank you to the white male community has been completely vilified through a lot of this. And as a result of it, guess what happened? Turtle goes back into the shell. I don't even know what to say. Channel communication is closed. I can't do bridge work if someone's throwing grenades at their side of the bridge.
So what are you finding when you approach companies? Are companies embracing this or not? Are they truly looking to, and how are they doing it? Is it through a diversity, equity, and inclusion program that they're trying to change? Are they setting new policies? What are they doing to actually bridge this gap?
I would say that's a great question for the brilliant women and men, I think men at the Winters Group. We're based out of Detroit. Because I'm not front facing with clients and companies. I don't have the spirit for that. I don't have I love being in the training room. I love working with the employees. I love doing the cross-cultural coaching and having a person who's a great leader, might be a CEO who's making really, really bad DEI decisions. But once you get them to the table and they do the subconscious bias work in a safe environment, it's not going to happen in an unsafe environment. That's where I'm all about shifting and changing the languaging to become equality-based. So if someone's in an activist type of language. Activist type language is over here. The fighting, the da 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 da. But if we're talking to somebody who's a CEO who's going, oh, what did I do wrong? I don't even know what I did wrong. I was told by my parents and my grandparents that I'm doing something right, right? And then they're like opening and going, oh my God, what? You know,
but I'm still trying to get down to the practical side of things. When you have a large organization, and I have found this, if you have a large organization, and that's great that the CEO of that large organization has started to take hold of these thoughts and are nurtured in some way to change their viewpoint, it still has to cascade down into the, into the boroughs of the organization. And let me tell you, as a consultant going into large organizations, the problem has never been, in my mind, at the CEO level, because they keep upgrading themselves and their viewpoints and their connections and reading different philosophies and all of that sort of thing. The problem is down in the boroughs with a manager or someone that has been given authority or capability and are not very good at that and creates issues with the staff. And then if you get it to the CEO and let them and notify you, yeah, they will try to change it. But beyond that, they're not aware. So how does this get filtered into a corporation so that the corporation is actually doing a self-audit of its people, who's in charge, who has the ability to create these types of negative or bias environments? How is that? I don't understand the practical side of that. So you can give some insights?
I can tell you that the Winters Group said it takes 3 months to just get that type of review that you're talking about. Once the company opens the doors and says, okay, come on in and do this audit or do this DEI review to see where we need to tweak and fix throughout the whole organization. So the culture is, I think the system you're talking about, I'm not sure, that you're talking about is culture change. And there's no silver bullet for culture change. It is a thing that is it's a network and a web of whole different things. So maybe that's not why I'm not giving you the answer to your question that you're really looking for. There is no silver bullet to change culture change. It is the tanker that you were talking about. That is a brilliant metaphor for it. I think it's great.
And just one correction. When I ask the question, I'm not looking for for any specific answer. We're having a conversation. I'm asking the things that based on what I've seen, the concerns that I know are out there. And I'm also trying to get a heartbeat to what degree change is realistic, it's happening or it's not happening, and try to get a sense of that. So it's not that I ask the questions looking for a particular answer. I just appreciate the honest answer when you say, I don't know. Right? Yeah, let my audience make their own assumptions or, outcomes based on that response. I think I think there's a massive systemic situation that has always been there. I think that, my people or people of color have come to survive within that system and have accepted things even to survive, to live, to forge the best possible life they can for themselves and their kids. 100%. And I think they have accepted certain things. Yeah. And as a result, we need to change ourselves. We need to be more vocal, more honest about what we're feeling, how we're feeling it, and why we're feeling it, right? Meaning just be frank. Don't hold it in anymore. Don't just shrug and say that's just the way life is. So I think there's a side of us that where we too have to change to help make people aware, not in a confrontational way or anything like that. But if we're asked questions, in all honesty, Catherine, we did not always answer it honestly, right? So to be a little bit more authentic about what we're experiencing. But on the same side, other people in society also need to self-reflect and say, to what degree am I contributing to the issue? And they have to figure out where they place in that whole dynamic, no different to any one of us. So I think it's a huge thing that has to change. And how do we change it? What can we as individuals do to help the conversation along and make people understand that it's not always from an anger point of view, a slavery history point of view. It really is, if you're in the present, how do I continue and how do I help this whole thing along positively? for everybody. As I said, it's not just for people of color, it's for everybody, right? To be treated the same way and fairly.
Totally. Yeah. So which question do you need me to answer next?
I want you to just to answer what the individual person, because you indicated you consider the big system, but you also look at the individual. So the question I want you to answer is, what is the responsibility of the individual to help this along? Because I'm having a hard time seeing the corporate CEO, especially through a large organization, to what degree and in what time frame does that get changed on a DEI platform? Does that make sense, the question?
I have no idea about the time frame. It's a good question. I love the question. I think that we have the power to shift it within a generation. I think we can shift it now if we have enough funding towards it. Money, 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 throw money at the problem. If we could get enough companies that were willing to pay for this stuff and just say yes, sign up for the Winters Group, sign up for companies like Cardis and IOR and these companies that Globe Smart and Cultural Detective and Culture Wizard. Just named a whole bunch of companies that digital platforms that companies can go to right now and sign up for those digital platforms and start learning about how we're different from one another. Not everybody's going to like every single way it comes packaged, but that's one thing companies can do right now. Call one of those companies, get on the line, find an interculturalist to come in and do cross-cultural training and subconscious bias training, which is not a data dump. It is totally experientially based. People have to go safely through the process of recognizing their own subconscious bias. That's a big thing for me. Safely, psychological safety. A lot of people right now on some sides of the argument are saying, oh, I'm sick of psychological safety, or people are too sensitive. That is where we have to suspend that negative judgment and seek out the alternative reasons. Some people physically cannot speak up. There are some people culturally who will not get rewarded for speaking up. There's some people physically who could get into too much physical states of anxiety. And that includes, now we have to start thinking about the diversity of people who have gone through trauma, regardless of where they're from, refugee status, people who've gone through major transition. Also, another great book for people who are like yourself, who are global nomads, who have raised their children in a passport other than their own, is a book called Third Culture Kids. Have you heard of that one yet?
No, I have not. So I made a note of it already.
You'll love it. Third Culture Kids talks about people who are either raised in a passport country other than the passport of their parents, raised in a country that, or raised in a biracial or bicultural family, raised in an environment of high mobility, like military, diplomats, expatriates. And then I've added to the definition Indigenous peoples who have been marginalized in their own lands.
Exactly.
So they were, when the beautiful people who wrote the book didn't include that, I know that that would have been in their heart in the writing of it. So I don't want to suggest that that wouldn't have been part of the spirit of behind the people. And that's another thing I'd like to say is I thought a lot about the pulling down of statues, where they're doing a great job right now in Jacksonville, Florida. They've got posters all over, change the name of the high schools. Like the way my sister-in-law explained it to me is some very overambitious person decided to get the name of the schools after Confederate soldiers and heroes. And so they're getting them changed to Flowing River and beautiful names like that.
So let me ask you this then. Do you see in the work that you're doing and in your touch points, are you seeing a generation rift on this subject? Totally. Do you see a rift? Because I see a massive rift.
Yeah, no, nail on the head. You really just like bang. That's the generational thing is really a challenge, because again, it goes back to not accepting that each other has a valid perspective. But
the younger generation don't have the viewpoint. They've been integrated. They love it. They see the benefits of cross culture.
I don't see that.
I see that. Oh, really?
Cool. I don't see that in my work.
Oh, how very interesting.
No, I don't see that.
I see that all the time.
If only those old people would just blah, 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 blah. If only those old people would just blah, 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 blah. Anytime you have somebody starting a sentence, if only that person would do this, they're in their ethnocentrism, they're in their bias, they are communicating in what I call a plus minus way. And it's not me, it's actually the work of Eric Byrne from Transactional Analysis, Frank Ernst, and Dr. Taby Kaler. So everything comes out of my mouth comes from some other great person that came before me that I read, or that, and I'm just integrating and connecting information and in every moment
Catherine, I
exchanging.
work with youth, and I do not see that issue. And in fact, I see the internet as
Good.
being a
A
wonderful
leveler.
catalyst
Yeah.
of cross-border interactions, friendships, both from a gender a gender neutral perspective, from a culture neutral perspective. Don't get me wrong, that there aren't some that come in that age group and mimic the environment they came from. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes
Yeah.
that happens. But
Sure.
for the most part, what I am seeing in the youth is an acceptance that is not necessarily there with prior generations. So, like, for example, when I tell you my
Totally.
grandmother did not like the color of my skin, I
Yes.
don't see that
Right.
permeating, that lens permeating beyond her generation.
Totally.
I've heard other people say they also had family members like that. It's less now. And I'm seeing the same thing with the new generations, that there is a rift of a certain level of generations trying to fix a problem that the younger generation does not believe exists. If as these younger generation grow and extend their touch points, it will naturally fall away because they don't have the same lens. So I was curious if you saw that kind of rift, because to me it's a real rift.
I think you're again nail on the head for me to agree with everything that you're saying. I think you're talking about content. What we believe. These are
Mm-hmm.
my beliefs, because people believed in equality before, but it was manifest in a very different way. What we believe in, that technical connectivity, has been what changed millennia of history. So we have the power. We're in a fulcrum point, as everybody talks about. And I'm talking about the process that I see when I'm training a young person who's going into a workplace environment. If the reward systems are telling them that they have to be incongruent with their value system, that creates that identity crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'm getting maybe I'm getting too complicated, but I teach at Baruch College. Yay, Baruch, go Baruch. I teach a class called Intercultural Training, Coaching, and Consulting. And so when I train my students there in the young adult stage, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes up through all of life, of course, and all of them come with I believe in equality, et cetera, et cetera. And then when we do the activities, people go, oh, I see now. It's more complicated than just that. Oh, now that I've felt what it feels like to be in my bias, oh, thank you for illuminating that for me without making me feel like a fool, that, because I think that's what a lot of the people in companies are so under the gun to keep the job. And I think a big, huge cultural problem here in the US is, and this is what I've learned through the cross-cultural training, especially when people from countries where they provide more social welfare,
Mm-hmm.
things like healthcare and things like that. I hear why do Americans, and really we should be saying U.S. Americans if we want to honor all Americans, but why are U.S. Americans, why do they live to work? And when I say, because if they don't have a job, they don't have health insurance, they all go, and then all of a sudden the reward system left the family,
Mm-hmm.
thankfully, so it can come up against something different than what it was, and so that you can learn that your Black skin is beautiful. And forgive me for any word that I use that's not correct, because I've got some people yelling at me that
No, I'm not offended. You're not going to get me offended. No, you're not going to get me offended. So don't worry about that. But one of the things is, we all have bias.
Exactly.
It's just being aware of the bias and what triggers it, and when it comes out, or when you're actually making a decision or acting based on a bias. So that is something that we can all get trained in, because I think we all have it. I think we all have it.
Once you're trained, it's finished. I'm sorry to get so excited, but I feel so passionately about this.
I think once you get trained, you become aware, because I've taken bias courses. Once you get trained, you become aware, but then you still have to put it into practice.
You're right.
For it to be eradicated. I don't believe once you're trained, it's gone. I'm sorry, Catherine. I don't.
For a long time. No, but I think that if we're talking about moving a ship, it's the direction we need to go. I have a great
Absolutely.
I was going through, in my survivorship, I turned to art to try to heal myself, and I landed in an acting class with at the wonderful William Esper studio with Suzanne Esper and the brilliant Bruce McCarty. And he would when he was trying to teach us, he'd be like, listen, I don't need you to be perfect. I don't care if you're falling, but as long as you're falling in the right direction, then that's how we build this.
Oh,
That's how we
absolutely.
build
Which goes,
become,
but what
you
that
know.
does is take us right back to the beginning where I say it still stands with the individual. Yes, you can take a bias class. Yes, you can become aware of all the different types of bias. You can get aware of the ones that apply to you. But now you have to go out and show that you've actually learned and that you're committed to the learning to actually change, not doing whatever it is that you're doing. So
smart. Oh, there's another great product that came up from Perotti, Denise Perotti. Look her up on LinkedIn. She's just put out a fabulous app that you can put into your phone that connects to your calendar. You're talking about practical steps in organization. Sticks right into your calendar, reminds you 2 or 3 times throughout the day. Before you walk up to that person, you know, do they want to be interrupted? Would they prefer a text before you go up? What is that? Learn something about their culture before you go up. Even if you don't talk about what you learned, there's little tiny tips that get the neural pathways redirected towards healthy bias versus unhealthy bias. I joined the anti-bias task force in East Hampton. I was invited, and I'm so grateful to be there. And I'm for the first time in a community-based level trying to figure out how the communication is healthy, how it would be in a healthy way. And I can see that there are people that there's a wonderful interculturalist named George Renwick, philosopher, doctorate, psychologist, corporate genius, et cetera, et cetera. And he says that, you know, there are certain things that people are willing to die for in culture when it comes to culture. So when we approach culture change, go to the Lao Tzu's, you know, The Art of War, which really is about the way. So we've got the content, I want to be good. But that's different. You said it earlier. You said, but there's a difference between wanting to be good, taking the anti-bias training stuff, and then actually putting that into practice.
Absolutely.
And that's a lifelong pursuit. If we were if we were born between 1950 and now, we have it in ourselves. We have to get it out in so many different ways: exercise, activity, singing, dancing, healthy interaction. But I have a word that I want to share with you that I came up with a word.
Okay, we're going to wrap up with this one, but go ahead.
Okay, the word is advuse, and I'm going to submit it to a dictionary. Advuse. It's the word advice, but we take out the I and we replace it with you. So when I try to give you something or you a piece of advice, that's really probably the work I need to do. That's really probably me not having an unfinished lesson that I haven't practiced enough yet.
Right.
Vocalizing out of me. But if I take a step and go, let me give advice instead, then I have to be a story listener. Kelly McLeod, great diversity, equity, inclusion coach on LinkedIn. She talks about storytelling and story listening. I would just look up a lot of these people and just start, hearing stories, listening to each other, practicing the platinum rule, shifting the golden rule from the platinum rule. Have you heard of the platinum rule?
Yes.
Okay, so that kind of stuff.
Okay, so on wrapping up here, let me summarize, because I think what the audience sees is that this is a complex conversation. We can probably talk about it for the next 2 hours to really, as you say, peel that onion skin and get to the heart. But I think what we've heard today is that at the end of the day, each of us have an individual obligation to clean out our gut, which means what we take in and what we push out.
Yeah, I like that.
And start to do the work that is needed to become a more inclusive and accepting person in our community, and start to apply that in our day-to-day. And it is not just a 24-hour thing. It is a lifetime journey. And if we do that, we should start to make some change on that oil tanker that we're trying to redirect. Catherine, this has not been an easy, it's not an easy topic. Thank you for broaching it. Thank you for the transparency of saying, I do not consider myself to have all the answers and to be, a complete expert. But what you have demonstrated is an individual that is willing to come to the table and make your own changes and get involved in redirecting that oil tanker. And that, let me tell you, from both the perspective of a mother, a podcaster, and a community who is present in the community of dissension and everything, it is appreciated.
Yeah,
So
you know
on
what?
that, yeah,
Al, I just want to say that the last thing I didn't include when I said I was sorry is that I'm actively in developing my allyship. Allyship is not a decision that somebody makes. It's something that we develop over time. And
mhm,
so I want to let people know that this is a safe place to where I'm practicing my own story listening. And through listening to other people's is how I feel that that's the most powerful learning and growing.
absolutely. And everyone who follows me know my motto is everybody is a human being, and I approach them with love at all
Awesome.
times.
I
So
love that.
I am totally open, colorless, and everything else, including myself. I just happen to have been born into this skin, but there is a rich, caring person beneath. And I have raised rich, caring people as a result of my own lineage. So, on that note, diversity, equity, and inclusion is not an easy topic. Systemic changes is not an easy task. We all have an obligation to contribute to it and
Yes,
to understand and be aware of where you land on the side of this discussion. And I am accepting of wherever you stand as long as you're not going out willfully harming anybody. And
exactly.
on
Yes.
that note, we will close. Thank you, Catherine, for joining us. It was a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
And
Thank you.
let's and
This
we
is
will
fun.
end. So thank you so much, everyone. So let's just end on that, and we will go out in a big way. So once again, for a raise at living podcast, and you'll see the podcast of this in a few weeks. It will be forthcoming, so you can catch it also on replay. We stream on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitch. So thank you once again, and look forward to the replay and to hearing from you guys. And even post the show, you can send in your comments, especially on YouTube. Thank you very much, and if you love what we do, please subscribe, like, submit reviews, because that's the only way we grow. Thank you so much.